My name's Jonathan Norman from the Major Projects Knowledge Hub, and I'm talking to Chris Cox, who is Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget for the state of Utah, and someone who's been a long-standing fan of the work of Eli Goldratt and works very hard on giving measurable value to people in everything that she does and in the work of government. So, Chris, let's start there with the kind of
Mhm,
things that you do. I
mhm.
work for the Major Projects Association, and what kind of projects does the governor's office get involved in?
So in my job, we basically oversee everything in the state. So all of the agencies report up through this office, their operations plus the budget. I'm also, the governor's budget director and essentially like the COO on the operations side. So it's a unique opportunity to really integrate budget with operations, which is, I think, is part of why Utah's success is what it is, because we can look at budgets in context of how well existing resources are being used. So we do everything from the state hospital to child welfare to business permitting to behavior health and mental health to regulatory reform. I mean, you name it, our office touches it. So it's a pretty broad scope.
I came across your work, I think, from a video that you posted on the problems of people seeing IT and other
Mhm.
systems and things as solutions to problems that they'd never actually bothered to articulate.
Mhm.
I don't know, have I accurately kind of paraphrased
Yeah,
the way that you approach
yeah.
that?
I think one of the most common challenges I see as we work with every aspect of government is that it's so easy to jump into the solutions mode. I almost feel like there's a solutions industry out there pushing solutions, a new data system, a new piece of technology, a new reorganization. And usually those changes are focused on the kind of administrative side, but where the value is really created on the ground, those people, we don't see big improvements there. So I call these the seductive seven. They're solutions people tend to jump to, but I would really prefer that people spend a lot more time up front thinking deeply about the problem. Sometimes we think it's obvious, or we all understand what it is, or people don't even spend time defining it, or too often if they do, they define the wrong problem. We get the problem wrong, everything downstream from there goes in the wrong direction. So I cannot overemphasize enough how critical it is to understand the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, that's interesting because that suggests to me two specific things. One, the fact that most problems, and certainly in government, whether local or national,
Mhm,
problems are related to individuals, people,
mhm,
how people are
mhm,
working, how citizens are
mhm,
accessing services, what citizens
mhm,
need, and how they're behaving,
mhm.
and that these things are actually they're not simple, they're complex.
So the thing that we always want to ask, we're working on a project right now with health and behavior health, which is mental health. Somebody who has a mental health challenge as well as a physical health challenge. How does somebody get services there? And we can talk about, reorganizing or integrating the funding, but the question always is, what's the physical change on the ground? What will change between the provider, the doctor, and the patient? We can't get to that level of detail. We usually fail in execution. And what I see is people have really great ideas, but they fail in execution and making that physical change. And I would say this about usually the challenges we face are simple, but they're not easy.
Right.
They're,
Yes.
the direction is simple, right? But there's a lot of details, and people, it's a
Yes.
grind to get into execution, and people kind of can wear out at that point. But that's where really the opportunity is.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, in that example that you gave, you've got the doctors themselves, and then you've also got the
Mhm.
patients, and trying to account for how they might behave, how they want to behave, what they're going to do. That's
Mhm.
going to have a big impact on how successful any solution that you
Absolutely.
implement.
We can do all the reorganization and all the new funding models and all this stuff, but if that doesn't change there,
Yes.
how services are synchronized, we failed. And that's what we got to stay focused on where the value is really created for people.
You referenced the seven seductive remedies, which I know is at
Mhm.
the heart of your book. And do you want to just kind of share those with us and say a little bit about them?
Sure. So I have seven, and it's just after working in, I probably have been in now maybe 180 major systems, and I see these things come up again and again and again. But these are the things that people jump to, and they're seductive because sometimes they may be part of the solution. They may be a tactic or an ingredient in the overall recipe, but they by themselves are never the solution. So people jump to more technology, right? Somehow if I just automate this, the problem will be fixed. Well, often we automate the wrong problem and hardwire the dysfunction into the system. People think if I have more data, right, then I'll have just more understanding. Well, a lot of times the data creates noise. We miss what's really going on. A lot of times people think if I just reorganize the resources, I just can control all the resources and I'll fix it. Well, usually it's a problem of synchronization, not just reorganizing the problem. People often jump to this idea that I need a new strategy. I just had a new idea, somehow this would get fixed. Well, usually it's a failure in execution, not about needing a new idea. Think of Amazon, their strategy is one place where you could buy everything. The challenge is in the execution. How do you make that happen? Inventory, supply, vendor agreements. That's where the challenge is, not in a new idea. A lot of times people think they go into more blaming and accountability. I see this in government all the time. You just need to hold these employees accountable, blame other people. We see this right now, both in the United States going on with our federal shutdown, and you guys have had some challenges in the UK. Really, we've been watching that. It really is about becoming accountable for what I already have stewardship over.
Yeah.
What impact can I make? And usually when we're blaming other people, we're distracting ourselves from where the real opportunity is. So that can be a big problem. What have I gone through? More data, more technology, more reorganization, more blaming, more strategy. I think I covered them all. I think I've covered all seven. So there's seven. Yeah, I think I've covered most of them. So those are the issues that people jump into. What we're proposing is, look, we need to stop jumping to solution and solve the core problem. There's a great quote I love by Thoreau. He says, for every 1,000 men hacking at the leaves of evil, there's only one chopping at the root. And what we see is people successful in implementing a solution. They've made the change, but it gives them the illusion of progress.
Yes.
Because in fact, nothing measurable on the ground has even really been changed, right? There's no significant 30, 40, 50% improvement for the taxpayer, the customer, our employees, but we are successful in making a change. So we get the illusion of progress. We're busy, but in fact, we haven't really changed anything of meaning at all.
Yes. And I mean, this state of affairs, is it something that's very different from, when I started my career sort of 35 years ago, or has it always been thus?
I think that the human tendency from, I like history and looking back even here in the United States, our forefathers, there's always been an issue of contention. It feels amplified, I think, because of the media and all the noise that creates. But I think the human tendency really is to blame. Eli Goldratt, and if you're familiar with this work, this idea that we really can find a win for all parties. We really can meet the needs of both parties. But that takes deeper thinking. Mm-hmm. It's harder work. It makes us think deeply and challenge the assumptions that we have. The easy thing is to blame. When people jump to the seductive 7, I think it's lazy thinking.
Yes.
It's harder work to really understand what the core problem is and to meet the needs of all stakeholders. What I often see is we'll shift the problem to another stakeholder. I win, you lose. I've just shifted the problem. So in fact, I haven't really solved the problem. I just have a temporary Band-Aid solution. The problem will come back to bite us. Yeah, I mean, I always wonder, okay, well, what am I doing wrong in my communication? Or what block do they have or limitation they have that I haven't helped them remove or solve yet? So it's really about giving more power to the goal and the vision than power to the obstacles, which we often do. Or it's also about empowering ourselves to be change agents and not waiting for somehow the world to come solve our problems, but to understand that we really can affect, at least in our own sphere, how we do our work. And hopefully if we do it well, we can impact others in a positive way.
That's great. I wanted to talk a little bit about knowledge sharing and how you've been experimenting, the kinds of things that you've been doing. I mean, in your book, Stop Decorating the Fish is a management fable. And I don't know how easy you found it writing in that form. It's something I used to find as a publisher. Authors would often say, I'd love to write a management novel. And they'd send me something and I'd kind of wince because it would be so horrendously awful. But how did you find the experience of writing as a fable?
It was interesting. My co-author, Ishai Ashlag, Dr. Ashlag, we were talking one day, and the idea, I was going through the seductive 7 and just talking about how sometimes people are swimming upstream. They keep swimming against the current or
Yes.
swimming against the core problem. And we just started talking about this fable. Well, what if, and literally the idea came to us in about 10 minutes. And then we mapped out for each of the seductive 7 where that could show up. And, it's evolving. I think we'll come out with the 2nd edition soon. There's a workbook that goes along with this, and that edition will be coming out soon too. But the idea came quickly, but what I am learning, there is evolution in thought. How do I become more precise
Yes.
in helping people understand how the problem of more technology, how that really shows up, and what we need to be really careful about in each one of these different elements.
Yeah.
So it came to us quickly, but writing, that takes more time. Iteration, edit.
Of course.
A lot. You know that better than me, I'm sure, in the publishing world.
I mean, I'm a great fan of analogy and the power of analogy, which is one of the reasons why Eli Goldratt's work always struck a chord with me. And I was amazed. I guess it's probably 3 years ago now when the graphic novel version of The Goal came out. I'd only seen. I thought it was even better than the original. I thought it was just fantastic. So I think using stories, and it's a very human thing to do, and I think this element of the human comes across in the way that you use video as well. So it's you projecting on the video, it's you and your colleagues, and it is a very human thing. I don't know if that was a very deliberate thing, or you just thought, I'd like to try video.
I came through the world of TOC not really having access to a mentor or body of knowledge. I kind of fought my way through it. Yes. Because I'd been in government so long. I've worked for, many governors and back in DC, and I just knew what was happening wasn't working. And so I actually read The Goal, but it didn't really fully click for government. We've had to really work to make it apply to government. Like, there's some unique aspects of government we've had to build out all new solutions for. How do you apply basic thinking to social service programs, right? The solution's a little different than the traditional TOC approach. But I've had to struggle through this, and I think in that struggle, just reading a hardcore technical book worked for me. I liked it, but it was hard to translate that to 23,000 employees.
Yes.
I mean, the issue in any of this work is how do you take ideas and make them consumable for people who don't live, eat, breathe operations?
Yes.
And make it something that's more inspiring. And I don't pretend to have this all figured out. I just feel like I got to speak my truth about stuff, and I care about people, and I want them to feel empowered that they can make a difference.
Yes.
But sometimes in government especially, people are trained on policy analysis and statistical modeling and regression, but sometimes we need to train people on think.
Yes.
How do we think? That is the most important skill, and we're not always trained on that. So
no,
it's a passion of mine.
It's great, and it's really great to see the way that you're communicating. I mean, I think this is true of, I don't want to be political, but both our governments at the moment, have different approaches to communicating. But the need for government to communicate and to have a kind of one-to-one conversation with individuals and in society and everyone, so that people feel that the government is talking not at them but with them. I think is pretty important.
Yeah, it is really. It's a mindset that's really, a part of this is, so, I'm blind,
Yes.
but those watching, listening don't. So, I actually at one point in my life was, when I first started going blind in my 20s, was unemployed. I was living off public benefits, like over $300 a month. The idea of working or having any contributions seemed kind of way outside the bounds of possibility for me. And I luckily had some amazing mentors that came in and helped me kind of put my life around. But I also lived the bureaucracy of government. It was frustrating, and it wasn't reliable, and it was just overwhelming to navigate it. And I think that has shaped some of my passion about never accepting the status quo, because there are people on the other side of that.
Yes.
There's taxpayers, people who are working hard, and we're extracting that money, and that could be money for their kids' college or whatever that we're pulling. And on the other side, we have customers that need help. They need a business permit so they can set up their business, or they need to get a water spill pipe problem fixed quickly, or they're a kid in juvenile justice services that they need to get their life turned around. How do we really impact that? And we can never, ever be okay with the status quo, because in my experience in government, there's just People don't always believe it, but there's so much hidden capacity to do more with our existing resources, but it's learning how to see those resources differently.
Yes.
And the seductive 7 really have to stop. People jump to them, and we've got to stop doing that and think, I keep going back to what's the real problem.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, and it'd be interesting to see whether this is the case in the US, but I get a sense that local government is much closer to the citizens that it represents, and is able to do things in ways that has meaning for its citizens and connects its citizens to which national government struggles with. And
yes,
and so I wonder whether the kind of work that you're doing, whether you feel that is that scalable? Could that be scaled up at a federal level, at a government level?
So I'm a reformed federal bureaucrat. So I worked back in DC, many, many years ago. And I look at what I used to do there, like just writing words on paper, as if writing words on paper is just, it's not the physical change, right? Yes. And there's too much of that going on, not enough execution. The people who aren't on the ground, these frontline workers are just dying.
Yes.
We keep throwing work on them, new ideas for technology, new changes to rule and regulation. In the meantime, they can't serve the people that they want to serve.
Yes.
So absolutely, it's scalable. It's absolutely. We started a goal in Utah right after the recession.
Yes.
Right. People's budgets had already felt like they had been, stripped. We said we want a 25% measurable improvement. There's a way we measure this. We have a multiple measurement approach. 25%. And you know what? Our agencies at first were like, that's impossible. But they found the capacity. And I think there's another 50, 60% capacity out there. And at the national level,
yes.
Tons of capacity.
Yes.
But, people have got to be willing to believe. That's the first step.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So let's end on a positive note, and
yes.
I'm looking forward to the future. What would you like to see, when you look to the future and the application of this kind of work and this approach to change and to policy, where would you like to see it go?
So in Utah, at least, we're trying to embed it into all aspects of government, from procurement to human resources to, if you want to promote, you've got to show basic capacity to manage the flow of work and to think, not just a subject matter expert. So we're cementing it here in Utah, and I feel like, we need to get our own house in order as much as we can and walk our talk as much as we can. And I do believe, though, that I've tried every other methodology, and it's not to diss any of them, right? Eli Goldratt wrote a great book, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, about the evolution of TOC and how important lean and other aspects have been. But TOC, to me, is a higher level because it really teaches us how to think. I would hope this would spread. We have other states already looking at this,
yes,
applying it with some amazing results. So I would hope that other people would have enough interest to at least start checking it out. But more than any of that, none of that will work if people don't even believe massive improvements are possible.
Yes.
Because it takes tenacity and hard work. So it starts with that belief. And if people can get there, the rest will come.